Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the podcast. This week, I was lucky enough to be able to catch up with James, who runs an account known as Salisbury underscore UK underscore foodie, and he clues in the name. He's a chef and also does a lot of food content, and some of his stuff is going to make you really, really hungry. But we're able to talk about COVID a little bit. We're able to talk about some of the changes that he feels and I feel maybe that some leadership may be able to take from this interesting year and stuff that we've been kind of growing through in that respect as well. But so I'm going to let him explain a little bit more about what he does and how he does it. And enjoy the interview. I'll see you very, very soon. And thank you ever so much for joining me once again.
Okay, my name's James. I'm head chef for a luxury care group in Salisbury that I'm looking to expand out through sort of across Wiltshire and different venues. But as well as that, I also do like an Instagram page where that I just try and show my love for food. Like come up with burgers. I love playing around with different flavors, different combinations, unusual stuff that you wouldn't normally see on a menu, and just making it work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for those who haven't checked out James's work, it will make you hungry. I'll put it that way. So, I mean, how did you kind of get started in this whole, I guess, food photography and food Instagram kind of world, I guess?
I had an account sort of like 2-3 years ago and never really did much with it. It was just like a mismatched account, just random stuff, a bit of food. Then it could be a picture of a tree. So I've always liked doing a little bit of photography, and it could be a picture of me on my bike. And then I thought, I'm not really getting any follows. My page doesn't really mean anything. So I started doing a bit of research. And as I'm like a chef and love food, I sort of decided that's going to be my niche to sort of go out and go, all out food, and just try and help people as well. As I get a lot of DMs and stuff. How do you do this? How do you do that? And I like doing that. So
I think for me it's one of those things where a lot of filmmakers, a lot of photographers, a lot of people on Instagram specifically, they talk a lot about their channels or their niche, right? Like I think yours, it was kind of a natural kind of progression to your niche because you kind of you love food, you're a chef anyway, so it was kind of a natural progression. I mean, how have you found the kind of Salisbury community, or the Salisbury community, or the Salisbury specifically the photo community, or just in general the Instagrammers in Salisbury area?
I think there's a lot of people in Salisbury area sort of say, like saying, "Where do I work? Where can we come for your food and stuff like that?" And it has sort of started waking me up to maybe I need to go off and do my own thing. So I've had a lot of positive feedback, and people are saying, go on and do it. I shared a picture of the boathouse in Salisbury, and I've actually had more response from people to say go and get it than I actually have from just me putting a picture of food up on my story. So it has given me a bit of inspiration to maybe sort of have the confidence to go off and do my own thing one day.
I mean, I think this is interesting. I was thinking, do we want to go down that, like, as you were mentioning, I was thinking, do we want to go down this topic or not? But I think it's going to be valuable. I think it's going to be interesting to explore a little bit. So, I mean, what was your, like, kind of, I guess, main hurdle or, like, your main concerns about, like, potentially going out by, on your, potentially on your own, or doing it as a side thing, etc. In that respect?
Well, I think the hurdle is now, I don't, no one knows what's happened with COVID and stuff like that. And I think the hospitality industry has been majorly hit. And it's not just the restaurants, it's from the growers to the suppliers to the distribution, the whole, procurement side, the whole procurement side of, the way the hospitality industry is completely been hit. I remember when it first happened, the amount of people that I knew that had just literally been laid off overnight. In hospitality, everyone thought they've got a job for life. You're safe, everyone wants food, and then COVID hit, and they were the first places to close. And as a chef, you always had in the back of your head that you could pick up a job anywhere, no matter where you work in the world. You could go traveling and pick up a job anywhere.
Yeah, because everyone's going to need that kind of, they're going to want good food. They're going to want to have that experience, to have that restaurant experience. I mean, do you think people have maybe, before COVID, they kind of took it for granted, and maybe now they won't necessarily?
No, absolutely. I mean, I certainly did. I thought, well, if I don't, like where I'm working, I can just pick up the phone tomorrow and, just go in the agency or go on to, like a job recruitment site and find yourself a job, because chefs move all the time, and pick up jobs. So I think a lot of people did take it for granted. They could just pick up the phone and get a job.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, and I don't think it's just hospitality specifically, but I think it's, like some of the other things that we may take for granted. Like I was just popping down the shop to buy XYZ, or that oh, I need a t-shirt, or I need a new shirt, or I need a new suit jacket, or I need a new pair of shoes, or whatever it may be. I think there's been this kind of transition where some of it's gone online, right? But obviously the food aspect can't really necessarily. But I think, I think in a lot what you do you think there's going to be a resurgence in, well, number one, people going out and eating more because they haven't been able to do it, but also number two, people wanting to learn more about how to cook, and wanting to cook. I use the term cook properly. Really look at what they're cooking, really look at how they're doing it, really look at the kind of food they're eating.
Yeah, I think more and more people are going to, it's because of lockdown and people not being out, being able to go for a drink, be going for meals. So they've actually taken up cooking as a hobby, because the amount of online classes out there have just absolutely soared. There's a world record broke yesterday by some guy who works for Marks and Spencer's with I can't remember what the total numbers were, but he broke the Guinness Book of Records, the amount of people who joined him for a live cooking on his Instagram. So I think that's the way what people are going forward, and restaurants have evolved as well. They're doing home meal kits that you cook yourself. So like, I know, it's a restaurant in Salisbury that do it. You order from their menu and they send you everything prepared, and then you cook it at home.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's one of those new industries and those new things that has kind of grown from COVID. And I think there's a misconception that COVID was, for obvious reasons, there was a lot of negativity around it, and a lot of worry, a lot of stress, a lot of those kind of things. But I also think if you think about it in the other way, you've also been forced into a position where maybe, and I'll throw back to you in a minute just to hear your thoughts on it, but I think there's been a lot of people who have like thought about, oh, maybe I should start a business, and they've used COVID as that catalyst to be able to do it, for example, or, maybe I should think about what I want to do, or how I want to do it, and etc. I mean, I think what have you, I mean, I use it in a simple question. I mean, what have you learned from COVID that you are going to take forward as we hopefully leave COVID behind us in the current form, right? Just for clarity's sake, I don't think the virus is going to go anywhere, but the reaction and the lockdowns and etc. and hopefully the amount of people dying from it is going to be lesser in that respect. But so what have you kind of learned that you're going to take forward into next year or moving forward in that respect?
Just don't take anything for granted. I think that's quite a simple answer. But plus a lot of COVID has had a lot of time for me. So I've had a lot of time to think about things over COVID. What I want and stuff like that. I've actually become more confident with my cooking over COVID. My page has boomed over COVID. Just I've had more time and stuff, and to reflect on actually what I want to do.
Yeah. So I mean, I think for me, it's been one of those things where certain businesses or certain people have either like kind of taken it as a chance to grow and develop and change and make what they do better, or some of them for whatever reason have kind of retracted and kind of gone back a little bit. I mean, have you seen that in your industry at all, or is it all just kind of like, oh, we need to move forward, we need to do this and this and this?
I think it's just business as usual with the industry that I am working in, like the care industry. I mean, our home was open just after the first COVID, then we got shut down again. But as far as our directors were concerned, it's business as usual, full PPE. And, that they were quite thankful that we were still able to work, not a lot of residents and stuff in, but he was really supportive, and he wanted this to work, which we coming on the backside of it now. So so hopefully moving forward, we could be doing really well.
Yeah, I see. And I think there's some of what we discussed a little bit before the podcast, before we jumped in. I think you were talking a little bit about some misconceptions that the kind of care food has. I mean, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think it's interesting for people who maybe necessarily don't know, but also some people who, what you guys are doing differently that maybe some others should think about, or should people should start upping their game in that respect, because I think it's going to be one of those like age-old unique selling point things, but I think it's going to be also something which people are going to need or want especially in your industry as well?
Yeah. What's the first of all, I've been given the opportunity. A lot of care groups, they stipulate the menus and stuff, but I was approached to take over this role. So I started the kitchen up from scratch. Got to choose my own team. I've chose my own suppliers. I'm working with local suppliers within the Salisbury area. My whole philosophy is to keep local. Try and support the community within Salisbury. Yeah, I could probably get stuff cheaper, but why should I when I've got just as good products right on my doorstep? And I think a lot of chefs are starting to change their philosophy on care. A lot of, I know a couple of people who've worked in Michelin star restaurants and they've gone into care because they've got a better work-life balance, and you can still produce good food because the type of clients we've got in our home, they've had very affluent, backgrounds. They've traveled the world, so they're used to a very, very good, palate diet. So gone are the days of your cottage pie, your shepherd's pie. We cook in restaurant standard food, and it's just my whole thing is to try and showcase what we do, and then I've got the backing by the directors to do that. So
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's really important to make sure that your every business, not even necessarily in your trade, but in any business, that you're always trying to up what you're doing and always trying to make sure that you're in a position where you're always pushing the boundary of what's possible, right? I think it's really important, and I mean something that would be interesting, I think, for the audience, but also for me to hear is how did you go about sort of building your team? I mean, you said you were in a very lucky position to be able to work with your own suppliers and go through that process. I mean, how did you kind of come up with the what were you looking for? What were the traits you were looking for in, say, your team or your suppliers, etc.? How did you kind of go about doing that when you were in the position of building your team?
well, first of all, one of the chefs from my previous job, jumped at the chance of coming along with me because he worked so well. Plus, we didn't really have the freedom there, which we have now. Together. Like, she's more on the pastry side of things, so I'm, quite lucky that she does all the pastry stuff, and I can stick to all doing all the main courses, all the fancy bits, with her support of helping me maintain and run my kitchen. And then the next bit was just, to pin down, good suppliers and stuff, which I've used in the past, when I was younger and stuff, and had the freedom to do it. And just to, go back to them and using them again, supporting them really. And, the quality second to none. In normal times, a lot of the stuff would be growing, not too far from around here. But at the moment, it's quite, it's difficult. They just got to pick where they're getting the stuff. But my whole thing was I would like to get stuff that is locally grown. We've just planted some pear trees, so we've got a herb garden. We get the residents involved with doing the herbs. We've got raised beds. So there's a lot of the stuff that my idea is, like, if we have a salad on at night, we're going to say that the salad was grown within our garden as well. So we've got, good gardens here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of those point, something that I've found anyway in the business community specifically is this kind of, I guess, this inherent want to continue to keep the community alive, right? Especially in Salisbury, I think there's a lot of goodwill, there's a lot of community. People call it Smallsbury for a reason because everyone knows everyone. But I also think it's one of those things where you can use that to your advantage in some ways in business, but also in general. I think it's important, especially now, to support the local areas where you can and the local places where you can, even if that's really, really local, like as you were saying with your growing it yourself. Because also I think there's an inherent want to do that because it feel I don't know whether it's just a psychological thing, but I think it feels better for the people, for your residents in your case, but maybe the business owners and etc. You have to support them, otherwise the reality of the fact is they're not going to be there, right? So I think it's important to appreciate that. I mean, is there any kind of golden gems or any like hidden things that you've been able to explore during lockdown? So that could be a business, that could be a hobby, that could be etc. that you have been able to do because of lockdown.
Well, I've just sort of communicated with different people over, a lot of people have reached out to me. I've got an opportunity to go and, do a collab with a local business that actually opened up through lockdown. Like a mobile food truck. The guy was a carpenter and he just had this idea, and it probably wouldn't have worked if it wasn't for lockdown, because people couldn't go out and eat, so people had to go to them, in like a car park, and take, eat their food and stuff. So I've been doing some work with them. I did some work. I did a cooking club with like older gentlemen, or that wanted to sort of that their wife or might have passed away and they never really cooked. So it's just to give them a bit of confidence. So hoping to like get all that started up again. As soon as lockdown came, that just all shut down and stuff. So hoping to get all that started up again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those important skills that, in general is to learning to cook and learning to sort of, understand what you are putting into your body, right? Like there's we're in a society where it's very convenient to eat, and they're very convenient to do things on this side of the world, at least, to be in that position. And I think it's great to hear those stories and those other businesses that have been able to think outside the box. But I mean, do you think some businesses are going to be in a position where, they will have sort of, those business owners would have thought, oh, wow, actually COVID was like actually really good for me, because otherwise I wouldn't have had the business that I would have had now, or I wouldn't be doing the thing I had now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, I saw there was talking to a lady on Instagram who was doing cakes and stuff, and she was really successful over COVID. And I think she's gone like full time doing that, doing delivery to people's doorsteps, with cakes and stuff, like cake boxes and biscuit boxes. And I think she's given up full-time work just to do this. And that was just lockdown. We had to take food to people. People didn't go to the food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think that there'll be, I know we kind of touched on this a little bit already, but do you think there's going to be in some ways a resurgence of people who will always necessarily now, want their food delivered? They won't necessarily have a weekly shop, so to speak, because they can get their meat delivered, they can get their milk delivered, they can get their fruit and veg delivered, they can get, etc. They can get pretty much everything they need delivered to their door. Do you think there's going to be a certain percentage of people who would rather do that, or do you think it will naturally become this kind of middle ground between some of the stuff you get delivered and then some that you still want to do that weekly shop-esque stuff? Because I think in some ways, for me anyway, there's some level of, I guess in some ways, community spirit or community part of it, like, especially if you're like coming to a market city like Salisbury, for example. Part of that is to know the traders, get to know the traders, have a conversation with the traders. You end up running into the same people every week, etc., etc., etc. So I think, do you think there's going to be? I'll just throw back to you, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on whether you think it's going to change for good in regards to deliveries, or whether it's going to be more 50-50, or what are your thoughts on those?
I mean, I think a lot of people will continue to get the home delivery because it's convenience. They don't have to go out, they can get what they want. But for me as a chef, I prefer to go out and see what I'm buying, feel what I'm buying, just to make sure the quality's there. But that's just me. But I think that some people will probably want to go out and buy, because you're interacting with people, not just as a chef but as a general public, with going to the local market, looking at the fruit and veg. You've got that interaction. But if you just get it delivered to home, then you're not interacting with anyone. But then some businesses have, through COVID, they've been really successful, and I don't think it's going to change. I think, week in, week out, I think the numbers are just going up for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I think it's one of those things where for some businesses it will be, like especially like I've heard things about butchers and stuff that they've now been able to take on new members of the team, because they have they have people who run the shop, and then they have people who run the market, and then they have people who run the delivery side of it, right? So they've just added another thing on top of what they were already doing, and it just means they're becoming stronger as a business, in my opinion. And I think for me, it's interesting because there's been this interesting kind of marketing change in regards to how COVID's kind of gone on, in regards to firstly what people's messaging is, but also number two, how they've gone about kind of utilizing social media. I mean, have you found that through your growth on social media, is there any like specific strategies or specific things that you've noticed work really, really well for of course this is maybe niche specific, but in general, what have you found works really, really well?
I think that people had a lot more time to engage. The more engagement you're going to get on your post, the more it's going to go up. But I just think there was more of a community feel on Instagram. You end up like talking to people that you don't really know, but then you do get to know them, just by commenting every day, DMing you for advice. So just I've just found out I was there to support people. If they wanted any advice, people had more time on their hands. Like I had one guy saying, "Oh, can you send me a recipe for that?" And you're just helping people out, really. So I get good satisfaction from that. And then I'll get people sending me, what they've produced, or they try and copy my stuff, and they'll say, hey, how does this, stack up to yours?
Yeah. See, I think a lot of what you're talking about there is building community around what you do, right? I think that's really important, and I found it really interesting because lately I've been kind of changing my tack in regards to how I go about business and how I go about networking, and because a lot of people say in networking it's you get out what you put in, but for me I've been trying to changing my strategy instead of being like, hey, this is what I do, hey, listen to me, hey, 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 which is what some people do, and what others have done in the past. But it's more about, let's talk about you, let's talk about how I can help you and what I can do. And what I found is when I've stopped trying to, I guess, hunt for clients, so to speak, I've actually been getting more clients. There's been more jobs coming in. There's been more requests to do work. I mean, is there like I guess in some ways like this is more restaurant-esque based or etc. But with there, do you find that if you do good work or in your experience, is it more about having to showcase what you do, or is it just sometimes maybe better not to sell as much in respect to like, oh guys, look at what we're doing, oh we got this offer on, yada yada yada, those kind of more sales-esque strategies. Have you found in your experience that it's better? Again, you may not have the experience to know, but like I'm just interested to hear, whether it's something which is just in my industry or just in my trade, or whether it's actually something in your in a similar trade as well, or in your trade as well.
I don't think you really need. Well, you need to advertise to start with, but if you've got good standards, it's word of mouth. People, people will just come to you as long as restaurants producing good food day in and day out. Word's just going to go around, especially a small place like Salisbury. And I don't think you need to. You don't think you need to advertise as long as you've got a good, you know, concrete ground, or and when people have got to understand what you're doing, then I think people are going to come. Because there's a few restaurants in Salisbury that don't really advertise, but they full because they don't need to advertise.
Mm-hmm. I think it, yeah, I think it comes down again to that kind of community thing. I think it's a constant balance, right? I think it depends again, like on, in my experience anyway, between what are you trying to actually advertise, right? Like, are you trying to showcase your brand? Are you trying to showcase what you do, how you do it, why you do it? And instead of like, oh, please come and buy because we've got an offer on and it's cheap, right? Like, I think price pays. I think for me, less of a role if the service or what you're buying, in your case perhaps is really really good, right? Would you say, what in your maybe your pre-care days specifically, but how would you go about like pricing up stuff? Would you like think, oh, maybe I should price like slightly higher because the quality's there, or were you concerned that you would put people off? And then what would you say in that respect? Because there's a misconception in my industry specifically where you should be like, oh, some people think you're too expensive, or oh, some people think you're too cheap, etc. But like for me, I've found that how much you charge for something is very subjective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But you can charge, in a sense, you can charge what you want as long as the quality and the standards are there, and service to back it up. People go to Michelin star restaurant, pay £200-300 for a tasting menu, but they don't even look back because the service has been good and it was well worth it, and they'll talk about it. But you can't start charging, £200 for, a whole experience that's not anywhere. It's just mediocre. You're not going to get anyone coming back. So it's just about building reputations.
Mm, mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what comes back to a lot of the branding conversations that us marketers have and etc. is about, are you building a brand here, or are you just trying to make short-term profit right now, right? And I think it's part of it's the part of the whole experience. It's part of the whole I'll give you an example, like how do you have to dress for the restaurant? Is it table service, etc., etc., etc. Things like that are what I would say, and then what the quality is, where do they source the meat, or etc., things like that. All of these things add to the overall atmosphere and aroma and the whole entire approach when it comes to how how to showcase the food. Obviously, the food is the main element because it's the main star in this case, but it's also about, I think the overall atmosphere in that respect as well. I think, and how to create that in a restaurant or in a dining setting. I mean, in the care industry specifically, do you have similar in the respect, or is it just like, okay, it's dinner time?
No, no, no. I do a proper service. So I've got like waitresses. They get, around the tables. There's menus on the tables like you would. It's an a la carte restaurant. So we ask the point of service what they'd like to cook, and then it gets produced, and we go around table by tables. It's a bit like it's a restaurant, and we've got dining rooms within the home. We've got a coffee shop. I've got a bar. We've got a cinema. So it's a whole. So it's pretty much like a hotel, and it's my dining service is run like a fine dining restaurant. It's all white china, there's proper nice seats, proper tablecloths. So it's not just chucked on, and the service is done in a timely manner. So you get the whole restaurant experience.
How do you, I guess, this is interesting for people who run their team or looking to run a team or looking to build that connections with other people. How do you kind of, I guess, put out, because I imagine there's problems, or there was problems, there is problems, etc. For example, say someone puts this could be true in restaurant, this, or in your case care as well, where, for example, someone puts an order in and then it comes into the kitchen, and then how do you sort of distribute what needs to be done for that dish or for that whatever it may be, to each person in your team within the kitchen, and then how do you make sure that it happens effectively in that respect? Is there strategies that you kind of have built, or is it like how does that process kind of run?
Well, I think your whole team needs a good understanding with each other's needs and communications, and that that is absolutely number one. You have to work together. You can't stop moaning and saying, "Oh, that's not my job," or someone's behind. Someone just has to jump in. At the end of the day, one big team, and we need to get the food out. And as me as head chef, that I need eyes, everywhere, because I'm quite OCD with stuff. So I'm on everything. I don't relax at service. I'm on edge, but I think that's a good thing, because I won't let anything go past my eyes that doesn't meet my standards. And in that way, I have to, in a sense, worry. I'm normally the first one in and the last one out, because then I'm quite happy when I get home that everything's been done.
Yeah, and you can make sure that you've done the best you can, and at the end of the day, the butt ends at you, right? It's the same with business owner. It's the same with the member of the team. If you're working with a team, there's a misconception that the team is going to if a problem happens, oh, it's the team member's fault, or etc. Like, it doesn't actually matter whose fault it is. At the end of the day, you as a leader, you need to be in a position where you can double check that, you can build the procedures, put the things in place, talk to your team about how do we stop this problem happening again. I imagine you've had, maybe not necessarily recently, but you've had situations where people have seen a problem, or there's been issues or concerns or arguments or etc. How have you as a leader kind of developed and defused those situations?
I just work with the individual, look where the problems is, if you need to do root cause analysis to take, what why is this happening, then you will. And just, people make mistakes, just tell that individual, you've made a mistake, but what can we do now to put it right? And try and, support them and stuff, but they also need to be willing to put their mistakes right. Because I've worked with some people who are just not willing, they just think they know it all, they're just above, those sort of people can be really, really tricky to work with, so as long as the individual can accept that they've made a mistake and willing to put it right, then as their boss, then we'll work together to put it right. I'll stay behind work, if it's something out of work that's bothering them, then I'm quite happy to support them.
Yeah, see, and I think it's one of those things where, it goes, in some ways it goes without saying, but also it's important if you are a leader, or you're a member of a team, or you're going to be looking to build a team in general, in any line of work. And that's why I like to talk about, leadership and in general team management, because it's important to appreciate that it's people skills, right? And I think in some ways that, if you're in, say, close to my role, where I deal with clients every day, and, I'm trying to juggle like 50 projects all at the same time, and I'm also dealing with the requests from the team and etc. as well. But it's in one of those positions where you need to still be able to, no matter how full your plate, no pun intended, is, that you're able to take that time to be human with that person, right? And understand where the issues may be, and where the issues may be, and how their outside of work perspective is, or issues outside of work may affect their job output, right? And how to, I guess, work with them to make sure that, you know, there is that level of support to help them, you know, in that respect as well. I mean, have you found there's as a specific, I guess in some ways it's very different, isn't it, because to each person, but I think is there, you know, can you tell quite quickly on, say, the recruitment process if like someone's going to work with your team, or you know, is going to be in a position where, you know already kind of they're going to work?
You know, absolutely. I think you can tell straight away, and I get my team involved as well with the interviews. You know, because we all one big team. I actually spend more time with my team than I do with people outside of work. Our team, you know, my team needs, you know, to work. So, and you know, so my team are only as good as me as well. So I need, you know, the right people, because I can't have someone coming in and disrupting the team. You know, or try to, you know, change. You know, change is good, but I can't have people, you know, trying to go off on their own steam without discussing it. You know, so if someone new coming in, it needs to be the right person. I'd rather go short than just recruit anyone. And my team have that as well. They will work with me. They will come in extra just so we've got the right people coming in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's really, as I say, I think it's really important to make sure that the team and you and whoever's going to work on a project or in a kitchen, in this case, you know, is all singing from the same hymn sheet, because there's, when it's go time, so to speak, or when it's, you know, service time or etc., where there's stress involved, you need to know these are the people who you're going to be able to rely on, and they're going to be able to do what's needed to be done without then flipping out, breaking, you know, having an argument, whatever, you know, whatever it may be. And I think it's one of those things that you have to set the groundwork first when the stress isn't there, because if it's not there, when the stress is there, you can run into it can be problematic. Yeah, you know, in that respect, from what I found anyway.
No, definitely. In the kitchen, it's a heated environment. You know, everyone needs to keep cool. And I've always found, when I was younger, I've always had the philosophy of not you know, my first head chef used to shout, swear. I got locked in the cupboards, got locked in the fridges, got locked in the freezers. And you're actually scared to do your job then, because you're scared of making mistakes. My philosophy was, when I ever got to be a head chef, I'd be the complete opposite. And I think when you start jumping around, start screaming and stuff like that, I think it just disrupts your whole team. They're on edge. You're not going to get anything from them because they're too scared to make a mistake. And everyone makes mistakes. We're just human, you know. So I just think, you know, for someone who's always shouting and stuff like that, I just, you know, it's not my philosophy as a head chef. You know, I've got a great team that work for me, and just, I think it's because I support them so much. You know, I mean, I back in, you know, if we don't have someone washing the dishes, I'll go and wash the dishes. You know, just because we all need to get the job done at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important that I think sometimes there's a misconception when you have a team, perhaps, or in general, where you can be in a position where, you know, oh, if an edit, like for example, in my case, if an edit can't happen for whatever reason, or this podcast can't get edited, you know, who actually ends up editing it? Me, because it still needs to get done, right? Like, in the same way, you know, oh, if you know, there's stuff that needs to be prepped for tomorrow, and you're a member of staff down or whatever, then guess who's doing it? You know, so it's one of those things where I think you need to understand that, but also need to be in a position where you can appreciate your team, and also, you know, a lot of people say there's a lot of this kind of like, you work as a leader, you work for your team, so then they work for you, right? It's a reciprocal relationship. It's not this kind of, I pay you or etc. So you are, you know, bending the knee for me, so to speak, right? How I found it anyway, right? I see myself on the same level as my team. I'm there to serve my team and help them do a better job, right?
Yeah, you're not, and yeah, you might be higher up in the team, but you're just a human being like them. You know, I've always, you get more from your team if you get stuck in with them.
Yeah, so I think you build that trust and that rapport as well with them, that, you know, and you know, I can say this from a background in retail. You know, if my manager's like, oh, we need to work really hard today, etc., 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 and they're working their ass off, then I'm more motivated to be like, okay, yeah, let's go. You know, the whole team feels like we're pushing in the same direction, you know, for the same goal. But if they're like, oh yeah, we need to work really hard today, and then they don't really pull their weight, or they don't really work hard as well, I'm like, well, you're not really doing what you said I should do. So why should, you know what I mean? Like, there's that disconnect there, and I think that's really important for anyone who runs a team. But in general, I think it's one of those things where you need to think about it, especially as if you are transitioning from a one-man band, so to speak, into then a team role, whether that's freelance wise or bringing on employees.
And the biggest thing is lead by example.
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%. I mean, that's kind of everything I had specifically to discuss today. I mean, in regards to what I wanted to cover, but I do like to add in on the bottom of the end of the podcast to just throw the floor open to you a little bit. So, is there any questions that you have for me, or or a question you have for me, or any specific topics you wanna throw in for us to discuss for a couple of minutes?
And just how you got started doing what you're doing.
I mean, the simple answer to that is I've created video content for a very, very long time. So I created back in when I was 12 or 13 or so. I started creating gaming related content, so let's plays, how to's, that kind of thing. My background origin is in game development, so one thing led to another. I kind of grew to the creative point with that, where I was just like, okay, well, I've kind of done what I can do with this, and then I was like, okay, but what else do I want to do? Around the same time, I got into photography, and then one thing led to another, where I was then in the position where I miss creating videos, but I didn't want to create the kind of videos that I had been creating. So then I reached out to some local event organizers, and I was like, hey, can we do something here? Is there stuff we can do? Is there stuff I can film, etc.? Because I want to get some experience. And then one thing led to another, and then I started doing more corporate-based videos and more commercial stuff, more promotional videos for businesses and that kind of thing. And then the rest is history in that respect. But it's always been like a goal and a passion of mine to help tell stories and help showcase why people are unique, because I think everyone has their own unique story in regards to how they go about their trade or business, and I think it's important to help showcase that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that's my next step, is to start creating videos and stuff. I think that's where I need to start up in my game.
Absolutely, 100%. I think, and we talked off the podcast and before about, I think personally it'd be really interesting to see, how you create what you do. Have like a final image of like a burger, but then also like a little video that shows like, okay, this is what we're going to be making today. These are the things we're going in, and then like some little steps on how to actually do that. Because I think you have so much knowledge and so much understanding of how to create it that it might have this preconception in your head of like, oh, everyone knows that. But we technically not necessarily, if that makes sense, because like, yeah, technically your day to day is your day to day, so you're going to know it, but most people won't, right? And I think a lot of people will find that really interesting. I mean, for those people who would be interested in seeing some of your gorgeous food shots that are going to make you really hungry, or just reaching out to you to have a conversation about, a little bit more about chefing perhaps, or cooking, or food in general, or etc. I mean, where can people kind of reach out and find you, and where's best for people to do that?
Just on my Instagram page, probably. That's Salisbury UK Foodie.
Fab. So yeah, thank you ever so much. I think we'll call it off there, but thank you ever so much. Is there any final thoughts, final things you want to mention? To say?
No, I think just thanks for giving me the opportunity to do this.
No, of course, 100%.
Also, it's been good.
Fab. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Cool.
Thank you so much for joining me once again, ladies and gents. I hope you did enjoy this podcast episode, and I hope you were able to take some value from mine and James' conversation. As I say, I wanted to kind of go in on and talk about the leadership roles and how he feels and how he's kind of been able to keep his team thrive in stressful situations, which can be running being a head chef in a quite busy kitchen. So yeah, thank you to him for joining me. If you did enjoy this video and would like to hear more, we're going to be putting the podcasts on Spotify, iTunes, and etc. as well. So if you would rather listen to them over there, when they're over there, I'll link them in the description down below. But thank you so much for coming back and listening once again. So if you did enjoy this video and would like to see more, make sure to be subscribed to the channel. I'd love to hear what you think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you very, very soon.